Hello, everybody. Today we're talking about an early controversy that develops in the history of the art academies of Europe, and that is the followers of Peter Paul Rubens versus the followers of Nicolas Poussin. And the Poussin versus Rubens debate was something that really bubbles under the surface of the art academies from very early on, from just about the beginning, all the way through about the 3 centuries that they dominated. So I've been studying Nicolas Poussin and Peter Paul Rubens a little more in depth, and so I wanted to tell you more about them. So Nicolas Poussin. Poussin is a Frenchman. He's born in France in about 1594, 1595. And he moves to Paris when he's about 17, so I think 1612 or so. He moves to Paris and begins to study under some minor masters there, and creates his first paintings. But while he's in Paris, he sees the artwork of some Italian painters, some Renaissance painters, and he's really taken with this Italian artwork, Renaissance and Baroque artwork. And so he really wants to travel to Rome and see more Italian art. So he does. 1624, 12 years later, so he's working and painting all that time. He moves to Rome and studies in Rome for several years. And by 1630, he's accepted into the Society of St. Luke. St. Luke, by the way, is one of the other major patron saints of artists, and someone whose praise I ask for every day. So he's accepted into this society, which means he has a good reputation going as he's painting in Rome. And he is influenced by the art that he sees around him. While he's in Rome, he gets to see a lot more art from these great Italian painters. Baroque art and Renaissance art, but especially he's influenced by the art of Raphael. Raphael is a huge influence on him, and he loves the art of Raphael and patterns his work after Raphael, I think, for much of the rest of his life. He also sees the work of Baroque painters who influence him as well, but not as strongly, not in the same way. He especially sees the art of Caravaggio in Rome, and just hates it. He hates Caravaggio. He says that Caravaggio came to destroy painting. So when you look at Caravaggio's artwork and the drama and how much of that intense chiaroscuro there is, Poussin rejects that. He doesn't like that. So really in the early 1630s, about the time that he comes into the Society of St. Luke, his work develops a different character. He really makes a fundamental decision to adopt the kind of aesthetic of the Greek and Roman art, which is to say, his art becomes very orderly, very harmonious, very composed and complex. He tells stories with his art, gives information, and does a lot of painting of allegories. He begins to get such a reputation while he's in Rome that he's invited by Cardinal Richelieu to come and be the court painter, the official painter to King Louis XIII. And so he does that. King Louis actually patronized a lot of great painters at that period. So being invited to come and be the court painter, the official painter to King Louis XIII, was an amazing privilege. So he does that. He goes to Paris and moves back to Paris and begins to paint for King Louis, and he hates it. This is the most miserable time of his life because King Louis just covers him up with work. He's just drowning in projects that the king wants him to do. And there are so many that he can't do the work himself. He has to supervise a team of assistants to do a lot of this work. And so a couple of years later, on the pretext of going back to Rome to get his wife. He travels back to Rome while King Louis is out of town and never comes back. So he moves back to Rome. Now, one of the reasons he didn't come back was maybe that King Louis and Cardinal Richelieu both die within a few years, and so that sort of lets him off the hook. But I don't think he was coming back anyway. So he remains in Rome and paints the rest of his life. And his style, this classical style, this ordered classical style, is very influential. His paintings, after he makes this jump to classicism, become a lot like the friezes in Greek temples. They resemble these friezes with all the characters sort of being parallel to the picture plane, like sort of in a line, very composed, very orderly, but also very intellectual. So these allegories that he paints, they have to be read. You have to look at them carefully and then decide who is each character, what do they represent, because they probably represent a lot more than just the person they are in the painting. They stand for different sort of historical attitudes and characters and philosophical ideas, and so you have to be a very educated person to really understand a Poussin painting completely. And this approach was a great influence on painters in the art academies for hundreds of years after. This classical approach, which really comes again from the Renaissance and never really goes away. It's always there. It's always present in these in the art academies. So Poussin, probably a name you haven't heard before, don't know much about, but someone who was a colossal influence on artists in the art academies, and so someone we should know about. So that's kind of Nicolas Poussin in a really quick glimpse, which brings us to Peter Paul Rubens, another name everybody should know.